It's been an honor to be a part of this revival so far. And it's tough to have followed that, but it's also tough to follow the two that went before me to give the message. But you know what? The same God that used them is going to use me this morning. I fully believe that this morning. I'm fired up. I'm ready to get into the Word this morning. I just wonder if you would stand with me one more time. Let's go to the Lord in prayer over His message this morning. Abba, Father, we come before you right now, God, as humble messengers, as humble servants of your kingdom, God, that you would anoint us, Lord, this morning to hear what you would have to say. God, I pray that everything that is said, everything that is done this morning would bring honor and would bring glory to your name, God. God, I pray that you would anoint me, your messenger, Father, that I would give the word as you would have to say it, and that I would not step out of line as to what everyone wants to say, but that it would only come from you, God. And God, I pray that you would anoint the folks that are here this morning, that you would open their ears, open their hearts, God, that we would understand and we would be able to go deeper with you, Lord, into a deep relationship with you, God, that you would stir our hearts with what's said this morning, not for my glory, but for yours and for yours alone, God. We give you all the praise and the glory and the honor. Amen, amen. God bless you. You can be seated. As I told you, I'm excited to be here. I've been fired up. I've been waiting to get up here. I'm excited to be up here. This has been a fantastic revival. I'm so glad to see what God is doing right here at Oliver Springs. It's awesome. I give Him the glory and the credit. I'm excited to be a part of John and Connie's life, and I count it an honor to be up here for them to entrust this pulpit to me. And I'm sure you're much more glad that I'm here than John is. Bless his heart. Are you ready to go to the Word this morning?
Yes.
This morning I want to talk to you about going deeper. Going deeper. This kind of really ties in. It's just confirmation in my spirit of what Justin said Friday night, what Jared said last night. It's just crazy how God has just intertwined what He's trying to say to all of us in this message. I've had this title for a long time. You know, sometimes like singers and stuff, they'll hear something and they'll put a note, song title, and they'll put it in the note and they'll come back to it later. Well, I did this about 3 months ago. I had a sermon title that popped in my head, said going deeper, so I put it in my notes, had no clue what it was going to become. But then this week, as I began to pray and see God, and He revealed this to me just in study and preparation for this, I want you to know that God has not called you to a shallow relationship with Him.
No, He doesn't.
He hasn't called you just to a superficial, sub-level relationship with Him. God wants a deep, passionate relationship with you. And He wants it to go both ways. Can you say amen?
Yes, amen.
He wants it to go both ways. You know, especially in our denomination, and this is no hit to our denomination in any means, please don't take that. But in our Pentecostal movement, it's so easy for us to get caught up in emotions of what's going on in the service, in our life, whatever. Somebody sings the right song and it just gives us the goosebumps. And we think, man, that was God. Yeah, it might have been God moving on you, but God is a deep God.
Yes,
God is the God that moves you in your car.
Amen.
God is the God that moves you when you're at Cracker Barrel. God is the God that moves you when you're at Waffle House and the lady beside you says she has cancer. That's the God that I'm talking about.
Yes,
That's the God that I want a relationship with. I don't just want the goosebumps anymore. I just don't want the superficial and the emotion anymore.
Yeah.
I want a deep, passionate relationship. And when that deep, passionate relationship gets stirred up in your spirit, it spurs you to move forward to servanthood in God.
Yes.
God hasn't called you just to come and sit in these pews every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night, every Sunday night, and check a box.
Right.
I'm glad, and I'm here to tell you that that's not a Christian lifestyle. Just coming to church is not going to get you to heaven. You can't get into heaven off of the prayers of your grandmother, off of the prayers of your father. You can't get into heaven that way. It requires a deep, passionate relationship with God the Father yourself. It comes from you. And I don't want you to think this is something that I've mastered. I think I said that last time. I say it every time. This isn't something I've mastered, but it's something I'm beginning the journey on. And a lot of this morning comes from that journey. It's that realization of these things. So what I want to do this morning is break this down into a couple of different sections. And I first want to answer the question of why do we stray from a deep relationship with God? What keeps us from going into a deep relationship with God? Why? What's the causes behind that? There's many causes, but this morning I want to give you the 3 deadly U's, as in the letter U. You might type these down in your phone somewhere. I found them kind of powerful. If you'd like to, if you're a note taker, that's fine. But these are the 3 deadly U's that keep us from a relationship with God, a deep relationship with God, not shallow, but a deep relationship with God. The first deadly U is uncertainty. Uncertainty keeps us from a deep relationship with God. Romans 1:17, we're going to go there in just a second. Deep relationship with God, the uncertainty. Romans 1:17 says this, "For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed." Righteousness that is by faith, from first to last. Now when I read that, I read, "For in the gospel, righteousness of God revealed." Oh, gospel is revealed. Woo! Revealed. I got it. But if I kept reading, it said, "by faith." Oh, by faith it's revealed. Okay. So I got to do a little something on my part for the gospel to be revealed, for me to make sense of what he's trying to say. I have to step out in faith. I have to know what he's talking about and have faith in it. We don't live by faith anymore. We live by emotions.
That's right.
We live by what feels good in the moment. If it feels good, we'll jump into it. If we sing a song, if we dance a dance, if we see God, we see something going on over there, it looks good, we'll go to it because of emotions. Emotions will not get you to a deep relationship with God. Emotions will put you on a high for about 2 days, and then you'll crash on those emotions. And there's nothing wrong with being excited and on fire about your relationship with God. But if your relationship with God is driven by emotions, it will fail you.
Right.
It will fail you. If you're not deeply rooted in faith in God, it will fail you. If you want to be certain of God's will in your life, you first have to know God deeply. You see, I struggled for a long time because I would get on fire for God and my emotions would drive me. And I would immediately want to go to the will of God. Get on fire, boom, time to do something. And that's great. You ought to be stepping out to serve God, to do something. But before you can know the will of God for your life, you have to know the God whose will it is. You have to know Him on a deep way, on a deep level, before He can reveal that will to you.
Yeah.
You know, if I knew my cousin Jared, and if I wanted to know what he wanted me to do, I could just say, "Oh, I think he needs me to go mow his grass this week." You know, and God talks to us like that sometimes. But it would be real better of me to say, "Hey, Jared, what's going on in your life, man? What you got need of? What can I talk to you about? What you got problems with? What can I help you with?" I have to communicate with Him in order to know what His need is. God is the same way. He wants you to communicate with Him. He wants you to talk with Him. He wants you to be in communion with Him so that you can understand His will for your life. And not what your will is, and He needs to fit it. I'm guilty of that. Is there anybody here this morning?
Right. Amen.
The next deadly U. So first we have that we were uncertain. The next deadly U is that we're unwilling.
Wow.
We're unwilling to go into a deep relationship with God. Coming into a deep relationship with God requires sacrifice. It's a discipline. Last time I was here, I preached about going through the press and being faithful in the times that we're pressing. And the presses are going to come in your relationship with God. It's guaranteed. Justin told us Friday night that the very first promise that God ever promised to us was what? Pain. That's the very first promise of God. I think He said it was in Genesis 3. Pain. Just because you're in a deep relationship with God does not mean it's going to be easy.
No.
Probably quite the contrary. Having a deep relationship is hard.
Yes, it is. is.
Having a faithful marriage is hard.
Yes.
Being best friends with someone is hard. It requires sacrifices of your time. It requires sacrifices of what you want to do.
Yes.
It requires much of us. But man, is it so worth it. It's so worth it.
Yes.
You know, a lot of times we're unwilling because we know that God, if we come into a deep relationship with God, He's going to say, you know, that person that you've been kind of talking to and messing around, teenagers, listen up to me. That boy that you've been kind of flirting with a little bit here and there, if you come into a deep relationship with me, he's not good for you. He's not good for you. He's going to bring you down. You know how hard that is in our hearts, especially at a young age, to listen to God versus a boy, a girl, whatever it may be? It's tough. I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there. We've all been there. John, it's been a long time for you, buddy, but we've been there. A long time. But we know that if we come into a deep relationship with God, He'll start chipping away at some things and saying, I see this part of your life that's in there. It doesn't belong. It doesn't need to be there. It's bad. It's rotten.
Right.
The fruit that's in your heart is going to be rotten because of this. And God wants to pull that out of your life. But you have to be willing.
Yes. Yes.
You have to sacrifice yourself. Paul struggled with this in Romans 7:15. And this is one of the most confusing passages I think I've ever read in my life. Because there's so many I want to do and don't want to do and this and that. But if you really read it, you'll see it's just human. It's just the way we are. Look at it. Romans 7:15. Paul said, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. He's saying, I know what I should do. I know what my heart wants to do. But I don't do it. It's exactly what he's saying. Deep in our heart, there's a tug to do the right thing. And as Christians, we should have morals and the discernment to know right from wrong.
Yes, amen.
But if our lives are not fully committed to a relationship and a deep relationship with God, then the sin desires will far outweigh the godly desires. Let's continue on. Romans 7. We'll start at 17 now. As it is, I no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. Did you know that every one of our natures are to sin? We weren't born to live a good life.
Right.
We weren't born that way. We were born into sin.
Yes, amen.
And so it's our automatic nature to do sin.
Right, it is.
It's counterintuitive to what our person wants to do.
Right.
Good is counterintuitive to that. But God desires more. That's why it's a discipline to go against the grain.
Yes, it is. Yes, it does.
For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We know what's good. We know what's right. We know what we're supposed to be doing. But because the sin in our life outweighs our deep relationship with God, we do the sin.
Right.
Is anybody here this morning guilty of that? I'm guilty of sin. I'm so guilty of it. I know exactly what I should be doing. God will tell me, Evan, you need to do this and you need to do that. And because I'm not perfect and I'm human just like you, I'll say, oh, gotcha. And I won't do it. I won't do it. Because I wrestle with my flesh on a daily basis. Paul said, I die daily.
What he said. Yes,
I crucify my flesh daily. If you want to have a deep relationship with God, you have to be willing to give up your own self, your own agenda.
Amen. Yes, amen.
Let's keep going. I could go forever here. The last deadly you is that we are unqualified. We're uncertain, we're unwilling, and we're unqualified. You know, I think we know that the moment we begin to go into a deep relationship with God, He's going to tug on our hearts to use the gifts and the abilities that He's given us. It's not in our Christian DNA to sit idly and not do anything for His kingdom. It's not. Whether you know that or not, you have a call on your life.
Right.
You have purpose. And being a Christian does not mean you just come sit here on Sundays and never do anything else.
Right. Amen.
But immediately when we start to go into that deep relationship with God and He's tugging on our hearts to sing a song. I want you to play the piano. I want you to go out and minister to the homeless. I want you to do these things that I've put in your heart to do. We say, I don't know that I'm qualified for that. God's birthed a ministry in my heart, and my first reaction was to say, I don't have the knowledge for that. I'm young, I'm fairly young, not real young anymore, but I'm fairly young. But I don't have the experience for that. And I immediately became, in my mind, that I was unqualified for it. We put people on a pedestal far too much. We say, if I could just sing like Jared does, or if I could just preach like John does, or if I could just play the piano like Bill does, if I could do this like that person, if I could just reach that many people like Stephen Furtick does, then I could work for God. But God's given you a unique ability. And He's put you in the exact place that you're in for a reason and a purpose. Get to work.
Yes.
I want to take a look real quick at what Jeremiah did. Jeremiah was called of God. And we're going to look at Jeremiah chapter 1. We're going to start at verse 4. Jeremiah was called by God, and he had a very humanistic response to the call of God. Let's look at it real quick. Jeremiah 1, 4 through 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. You see, God had a plan for you before you were ever even a thought on this earth. Before your parents were born, before their parents were born, all of that. God looked at the timeline of history and said, I'm going to need a Carmen Turner to come into the world in 2018. She's going to be ripe at that age and do something for me.
Yes,
she's going to be in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. She's going to be in high school. She's going to have friends around her that need me. And I'm going to plant her right there.
Yes, amen. Yes, amen.
And Jeremiah, what he did was he said, oh, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a child. How many times in our lives do we allow ourselves to rob something, a blessing, or God to do something long before the enemy ever gets to us? We blame it on the enemy, but really it was your self-doubt. Really it was your thought that you weren't adequate enough. Really, it was your unwillingness. The enemy didn't even get to you. He didn't have to. You killed it yourself. I'm so guilty of this. You say, well, you know, when God looked at the timeline, He didn't put an Elijah there. He didn't put a Moses there. He put you. He put John Turner as the pastor at Oliver Springs in 2018 for a reason and for a purpose. I was looking in James the other day, talking about Elijah. And James 5:17 says this, and it's so powerful. It says, Elijah was a man just like us.
That's what he said. Yes, amen.
Just like us. We put Elijah, we put Moses on a pedal. We put all these prophets and all these people of God on a pedestal. But they were a man and a woman just like you.
Yes, amen. Yes, amen.
The difference is they were willing.
Yes, amen.
They let their inadequacy not stop them from doing something for God.
Right. Amen.
Don't sell yourself short. God has a purpose, whether you're 19 or you're 90. Whether you're 7 or 70. God has a purpose for you. God has a plan for you, and He put you right where you are for a reason and for a purpose. Stop selling yourself short. So those are the three deadly U's. Uncertainty, unwillingness, and unqualified. So now that we know those things, how do we surrender? What happens? How do we become in that relationship with God? How do we deepen our relationship with God? Well, I gave myself away there, but the first step is surrender. Surrender. Romans 6 and verse 16 is where we're going to go. The first step is we have to surrender ourselves before Him. Romans 6:16 says, "Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to what? Death, or to obedience, which leads to what? Righteousness. But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance."
Oh my goodness. Yes, amen.
You've been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness. That word slaves is harsh. It's in our minds in this day and age, it's a harsh word, but it really just means that you're obedient to righteousness, that you work for righteousness, that righteousness is your leader. It's your person that owns you, basically. Mark 10:29 through 31. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mothers or father or children or lands for my sake and for the gospel, who will not receive 100-fold now in this time, houses, brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands, with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life."
Oh, yes, amen. Yes, amen.
But many that are first, they're going to be what? Last. And the last will be first.
Wow.
I'm here to tell you that sometimes surrender requires you to give up everything you have.
It does.
That is terrifying too.
Yeah.
I look at my beautiful wife and our gorgeous daughter, and you know there's a wrestle in my heart that says, if I have to give them up to serve God, to be a child of God, I got to get on my face before Him and really search after Him. That's tough. But it says right there, you have to be willing to give it all up.
Right.
And if you do, you'll inherit that much more.
Yes, amen.
We have to be willing to surrender. The most important part of going deep with God is being willing to lay everything down. You'll never fall deeply in love with God if you don't crucify yourself. This includes your will, your agenda, your preconceived notions of what you want to do in life. All of it surrendered to Him.
Right.
That was huge to me to have to say, you know, this is what I want to do with my life. God jumped on board with it. And He just said, what you don't know is, that's not the way this is going to work. And I had to surrender that will, that agenda, everything that I thought was going to happen with my life had to be surrendered before Him, before He could fully use me. The next part of this is that the next step that we need to take in order to have a deep relationship with God, to strengthen our relationship with God, is we have to communicate with God. Prayer is a discipline. Prayer requires sacrifices. It requires us to put Him above everything else that's going on in our life. Justin talked the other night about reprogramming our mind to hear what he's trying to say in our lives, to get rid of the distractions that may be out there. Right in line with what I was getting ready to say. Prayer requires you to set everything aside and to say, God, I'm going to spend these 15 minutes that I'm driving to work with You. Instead of listening to B97.5 or whatever on the way into work, I'm going to shut that off and I'm just going to talk and commune with You for a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have time to talk with God for 30 or 40 minutes. Oh, I don't have all this extra space in my schedule. You need to make some time.
Yes, amen.
You need to make your priorities in line with God, with your relationship. If you ever want to go deeper in your relationship with God, and that was the first step, you have to be willing you're going to have to make some priorities and some time for God. God wants your love and your affection more than He wants your actions. He wants you to talk with Him, to love on Him, more than He wants you to get fired up and go do something. That'll come. You're going to work for God. But first, you need to know God in a deep relationship with Him. The last part of that, how do we strengthen, is to meditate on His Word. Psalms 119 and 105 said, "Your Word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." How can we ever learn to hear God's voice if we don't read the words that He's already gave us?
Right. Right.
All the times we're asking God for a new revelation about something, for Him to speak in our lives some great big thing. And we ask and we ask and we ask, and a lot of times you'll find you don't get a response. Because you never looked what His Word says already. He's saying, how can I give you a word when you won't read my Word? When you won't read what I've already said to you? I've given you the outline, the blueprint of what you need to do to come into a deep relationship with me. Stop asking me for a new word when I have tons of things to say to you right here in my Word.
Yes, amen. Yes, amen.
He wants to come into a deep relationship with you. He wants you to desire it, to be willing for it. And then the last part of this is, once we do step out in faith, once we do come to a deep relationship, what's it going to look like? What's going to come from that deep relationship? And the first thing is, we're going to have renewed vision. When you finally take the plunge and you fall in love with God like you never have before, His will begin to reveal it. He'll begin to reveal that will for your life. You'll see things that you oftentimes ignored as opportunities to minister now.
Yes.
Before we fell in love, we're constantly asking God to open new doors for us to minister into. You know, we're asking, oh God, open this door for me. Open this door for me. I want to be used. But the door seems closed. You know, I'm not so much as worried about closed doors. You know, God can do anything.
Yes, He can.
God can open a door overnight. God can work behind closed doors. What I'm worried about is the doors that are open that we're not walking through.
Wow. Yes, amen. Yes, amen.
There are so many opportunities right in front of your face right now that God's saying, I want to use you in this small spot. I want you to minister to that person at school, at your work that seems hurting, that's hungry, that needs something. But you're asking for something bigger. You're asking for some large, grand scale thing. But I just want you to talk to this person. I just want you to show them love. I just want you to pray for them. We need to stop asking God to open big, extravagant doors and start asking Him to reveal our eyes, to show us that there are doors open all over the place in front of us. And we need to start walking through those doors first.
Yes, amen.
The second part of what your relationship will look like when you come into a deep, passionate relationship is that you're going to have peace. You're going to have peace like you haven't experienced before.
Yes, amen.
When we go deep with God, we'll find that the things we used to worry about, they don't matter anymore. God will give you a peace like you haven't experienced before. 1 Peter 5, 6 and 7 says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time," everybody say that, "at the proper time, He may exalt you, casting all of your anxieties, your worries, your fears, your doubts on Him, because," what? "He cares for you." Humble yourselves. Be willing under the hand of God, so that at the proper time. God doesn't work on your time schedule. God doesn't work how you think and when you think things need to happen. He works His own way. He works His own time frame, His own schedule. And it's better than you ever thought about. Because He knows best. I promise you. As you go deep with God, your peace about everything going around you increases. I talked to somebody the other day and they were telling me that they had this real rough situation happen in their family and they got alone with God during that time.
Listen to that.
And I don't think, I didn't ask her, but I don't think that she prayed some extravagant prayer. I don't think that she said some big lamentation or something like that. I think she just shut up for a minute. And she just sought God to say something in her life. And you know what He did? He gave her peace about that situation. If you'll make time for God, if you'll put Him as a priority in your life, if you'll strengthen your relationship and go deep with God,
Yes, amen.
you'll experience peace.
Yes, amen.
And the last thing that He's going to give you is courage to step out in faith. This was the biggest part of this whole thing for me, was courage to step out in faith. I'm working, and I've been working on strengthening and coming to a new deep level with God lately. I'm coming to that. But what I failed to realize is that a lot of times I was asking God to reveal this big, huge blueprint of what I was supposed to do. I had some seeds in my heart. I had some things that I thought that He wanted me to do, but I thought, I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know where to go next. All of these things. And so I would pray for clarity in my life. God, give me clarity for this situation. God, give me clarity for how You want to use me. But you know what God told me is that the opposite of faith is clarity. The opposite of what I think God needs to do and what I am asking Him to do. Give me clarity, give me clarity. The opposite of that is faith.
Amen.
God said, I gave something to you. I've given you seeds in your heart. Step out in faith.
Yes.
Stop praying for clarity. Pray for courage.
My goodness.
Pray for courage to step out on what I've given you. Pray for courage that you can go with boldness into what I've given you. Pray for courage. And that's changed my whole outlook on everything. I stopped wondering what was going to happen next. I stopped wondering where God was going to use me and what it was going to look like. And I just started moving.
Yes, amen.
I just started doing what I felt God needed me to do. That's tough. That's tough to change your outlook. But important that God will give you the courage to take the leap of faith. Clarity versus courage. Clarity versus courage. If the worship team will go ahead and come. It's time that we stop settling for the emotional roller coaster relationship with God. Where we get on a high for a while and we crash. Where we get fired up and we run on emotions and what feels good and the goosebumps that we feel in the service. And we start asking for a deep, dynamic relationship with God that moves us to servanthood for His kingdom and for His glory. Because of our love for Him. Not because of emotion. Because of our love for Him and our passion for Him. There's always going to be a good day and bad days in this. I don't want to tell you that coming into a deep relationship is going to make your life easier. It's not. It's not. But what coming into a deep relationship will do is it will give you new spiritual glasses to see the life that's around you in a new light. It'll see opportunities where you saw closed doors last time. It'll give you courage to step out where you were praying for clarity.
Right.
A deep relationship, a dynamic relationship with God is imperative for you to make it through.
Yes, amen.
Your superficial, shallow relationship with God is not going to get you there. Never will. It's not what God's called you to do.
Man.
This morning I'm going to ask you to stand with me. I'm not going to draw this out. I'm not going to give some big speech or something like that. All I'm going to ask you is, what's your relationship with God look like right now? Are you content with it? Are you happy with it? But more importantly, is He happy with it?
Yes, amen.
Is He desiring more of you? More of your time to be spent with Him? He's yearning for that, for you just to step out in faith for Him and say, God, I want a deep relationship with You.
Amen.
God, I want to know You like I've never experienced You before. I need peace. I need courage. I need boldness. But before all of that, you need to know Him deeper.
Yes, amen.
If that's your desire this morning, I'm going to ask you to come to the front. Join me up here, because I'm going to be here too. I'm on this journey with you. Come and ask God to give you a dynamic relationship with Him. Put you on a journey that is pushing you towards doing servanthood for His kingdom because of your love for Him. Will you join me?
I'm still